On May 12, 2008, a magnitude 7.9 earthquake ruptured the Longmen-Shan Fault in Sichuan. Energy stored along the edge of the Tibetan Plateau produced strong accelerations, cracking roads, bridges, and villages. Thousands of landslides blocked valleys and created unstable landslide-dammed lakes, requiring evacuations and controlled drawdowns. Poorly built schools and homes collapsed in brittle fashion. The phrase tofu buildings encapsulated the construction failure. Response teams opened alternative routes, launched temporary bridges, and used helicopters to reach isolated communities. Satellites and rain gauges began monitoring critical slopes during the following monsoons, preventing secondary failures. The central lesson was simple: a code without rigorous enforcement turns to paper. Details, materials, and joints determine performance. It also became clear that indirect risks, such as landslide lakes, require their own protocols, continuous communication, and testing. Sichuan became a case study for independent inspections, standardized school designs, and annual drills with community participation. The disaster showed that anticipating slope hazards, enforcing construction, and training neighbors saves lives before the machines arrive. Energy redundancy kept the sirens running.
If this is making sense to you, subscribe now and comment what you think. That tells me to keep going, and it makes sure you get the next ones without missing them.
In the early hours of July 28, 1976, Tangshan suffered a magnitude 7.5 earthquake in Hebei. The timing increased exposure. Crowded dormitories and night shifts in heavy factories were caught at the worst moment. Buildings with insufficient seismic detailing exhibited brittle failure mechanisms, such as short columns and loss of slab support. Unanchored non-structural elements fell onto escape routes, creating lethal bottlenecks and delaying rescue teams. Communications collapsed. Neighbors and military units initiated searches, clearing debris with simple tools and courage. Rapid mapping prioritized controlled demolitions, road openings, and the setup of temporary shelters in stable areas. The event spurred code revisions requiring joint reinforcement, proper seismic joints, and greater system ductility. First-hour community training and redundant communication plans became pillars of urban preparedness. The experience showed that anchoring furniture, clearing stairwells, and running evacuation drills save more lives than late-arriving machinery. Tangshan remains a global reference for reducing brittle collapses and accelerating rescues in densely built urban environments.
In the winter of 1556, during the Ming Dynasty, an earthquake struck Shaanxi, Gansu, and Shanxi on the Los Plateau. The Los, a fine, loosely consolidated, wind-blown sediment, amplified seismic waves and lost cohesion under prolonged shaking. Cave dwellings, known as yaodong, concentrated residents at night and collapsed due to roof and wall instability. Local chronicles described villages leveled in moments with great numerical uncertainty, but consensus about the extraordinary human toll. The dominant mechanisms combined site amplification, slope topographic effects, and progressive disaggregation of the material. Mitigation measures include reinforcing vaults, stabilizing slopes, adding timber ties, and ensuring external escape routes. Simple geotechnical assessments before excavating, surface drainage, and setbacks from edges reduce collapses in later events. The case cemented the lesson that soil and building typology can outweigh magnitude as determinants of damage. Territorial planning began to consider microzonation, moving settlements away from the steepest, most unstable Los Gullies. Shanxi remains a warning, knowing the ground saves lives when the night shakes without warning. In 1887, the Yellow River burst through dikes near Zhengzhou and flooded the northern plain all the way to Shandong. The river's heavy sediment load had raised its bed, creating a suspended channel that overtopped laterally with destructive speed. When one section gave way, the flow sheared off banks, swept away homes, railways, and croplands, and reshaped the shores within hours. Millions were affected. Displacement lasted for years as transport routes and tax collection shifted with the new channels. Corvée-based maintenance produced uneven quality and slow response. Concentrated rains overwhelmed local stopgaps and inspections. The systemic mistake was betting on taller dikes without floodways, detention basins, and levee park buffers. Modern techniques prioritize upstream sediment management, controlled spillover, and multi-channel warnings for phased evacuations. The episode became a global reference for high sediment rivers and recurrent floods under persistent monsoons. The message is pragmatic. Giving water room reduces disasters and shortens recovery for riverside communities. Planning relief flows costs less than rebuilding entire cities swept away by a single breach.
On December 16, 1920, a very strong earthquake struck Haiyuan, affecting Ningxia, Gansu, and neighboring areas. Rupture along active faults on the edge of the Loess Plateau produced intense site amplification. Mass landslides toppled slopes, dammed valleys, and created temporary lakes prone to sudden outburst floods. Areas with saturated sandy soils experienced liquefaction. Buildings without proper tie-downs collapsed with very low ductility. The harsh winter worsened conditions for the displaced and hampered rescue logistics and emergency shelter. Mitigations include confined masonry with bands and piers, improved foundations, and setbacks from unstable edges. Surface drainage and water management reduced saturation, limiting delayed landslides after subsequent rains. In August 2010, Zhoukou in Gansu was hit by a devastating debris flow after intense, concentrated rainfall. Small catchments, deeply dissected slopes, and degraded vegetation produced extremely short response times and critical soil saturation. The high-density debris flow slurry swept away houses, vehicles, and people, choked valleys, and created dangerous sudden impoundments. Settlement on alluvial fans and along the margins of the main channel exponentially increased exposure to frontal impacts. Effective measures include hazard mapping, excluding new development, debris retention basins, training walls, and high-clearance bridges. Alert systems based on actionable thresholds provide crucial minutes for vertical evacuation to safe elevations. Recovery requires rapid sediment removal to reopen drainage, prevent new surges, and restore access to services. Resettlement plans on stable, secure terraces break cycles of loss, reducing risk over the decades.
In August 1975, the stationary typhoon Nina dumped extraordinary rainfall over Henan, far beyond design assumptions. The Bangkeo Dam faced insufficient spillway capacity. Overtopping led to internal erosion and structural failure of the crest. Downed power and phone lines prevented warnings. Where they existed, community radios and improvised couriers proved decisive. Although the failure was infrastructural, the trigger was natural, a short-duration rainfall event outside the historical record. Key lessons include designing for the credible worst case plus margin, and planning detention basins and auxiliary spillways. Interdependent systems require hydraulic decoupling. Failure modes must be contained rather than catastrophic. Periodic audits, code updates, and emergency drills shorten response times and reduce indirect mortality. Bangkeo became a global touchstone for systemic risk, inspiring policies for energy redundancy and independent communications. In the summer of 1931, persistent monsoons and ocean anomalies produced exceptional rainfall across the Yangtze, Huai, and Yellow River basins. Saturated soils, aging dikes, and sediment-raised riverbeds led to prolonged overtopping and successive breaches. Riverside cities like Wuhan were cut off for weeks, while rural areas lost seed, tools, and entire harvests. Waterborne disease and famine magnified the losses. Statistical discrepancies reflect underreporting and regional administrative collapse.
Limited rail logistics and insufficient boats delayed evacuations, emergency supplies, and priority sanitation clearances. The 1931 floods remain a model for multi-basin management under extended monsoons, combining engineering, warning systems, and social protection. Transparency speeds decision-making.